The slap landed before the music stopped. 1 second, the orchestra was mid-note. Violins climbing, champagne glasses catching gold light from 3 dozen chandeliers above. The next second, the sound cracked through the Aurelius ballroom like a gunshot wrapped in silk. And every single person froze. Kalen Vire hit the marble floor with his shoulder. His silver suit caught the light on the way down. His dark hair fell across his face. His lips parted, wide open, like the cry was already forming in his throat. But no sound came out. Not one. The orchestra stopped completely now. Bow lifted from string. Breath held in lungs. 200 of the most powerful people in the city stood with their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths, watching a young man crumple to the floor in front of them. And not one person moved to help him. Lysander Haraway smoothed his jacket cuff. Slow, deliberate, like he hadn't just knocked a man to the ground in front of witnesses. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold, and his voice, when it came, was quiet enough to be more threatening than a shout. "Get up," Lysander said. "You embarrassed me." Hi viewers. If someone you loved was silenced and no one in a room full of powerful people helped them, would you have been the one to step forward? Or would you have stayed quiet too? Drop your honest answer in the comments. Kalen pushed himself upright slowly. His right hand pressed flat against the floor. His left, for just a moment, reached up toward his cheek. Then it dropped, like he'd caught himself doing something he'd been punished for before. That detail, that small, broken detail. Riven Drager saw it from across the room. He'd been standing near the east column with a glass he hadn't touched, watching the crowd the way a man watches traffic. Counting patterns, clocking exits, calculating which smile in the room was hiding the most. He came to the Aurelius Gala every year because they needed him here. His shipping routes kept half these families supplied. His silence kept the other half out of prison. So they invited him, and he always came, and he always left early. But right now, Riven wasn't leaving. He was watching Kalen Vire press a trembling hand against his own knee and push himself back to standing. Watching him straighten his silver jacket with shaking fingers. Watching him lower his eyes and go completely, utterly still. Like an animal that had learned the hard way that stillness was the only armor it had. Riven's glass lowered. His enforcer, Castor Cole, tall, broad-shouldered, black suit, never smiling, stepped up beside him without being called. That was Castor's gift. He always knew when something was shifting. "Don't," Castor said quietly. Riven didn't answer. Because Kalen had just looked up. Not at Lysander. Not at the crowd. Directly at Riven. Their eyes locked for exactly 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, Riven clocked everything. The cufflinks sitting too low on the wrist, covering something. The posture that was too controlled for someone who'd just been hit, practiced, not natural. The silence that hadn't broken even on impact. Not shyness, not shock. Something else entirely. Lysander grabbed Kalen's arm. Riven was already moving. The crowd parted, not because they wanted to, but because Riven Drager moved through a room the way weather moves through a city. You didn't block it. You stepped aside and waited for it to pass. He stopped 6 feet from Lysander. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch anyone. He just looked at Lysander Haraway the way a man looks at something he's already decided to destroy, calm, clear, and completely without rush. "Touch him again," Riven said, "and you'll regret being born into that family." Lysander's lip curled. "You have no authority here, Drager. This is a private event." Riven tilted his head exactly 1 inch. "So is a funeral," he said. The room went colder. Kalen stood between them, chest rising and falling fast. His eyes moved from Lysander to Riven and back. His lips were still parted, still silent, but his hands, at his sides now, were pressing into his palms so hard his knuckles had gone white. And Riven noticed something that stopped him completely. When Kalen opened his mouth again, just slightly, just the edge of a breath, there was no sound. Not even the small, involuntary noise a person makes when they're terrified. Nothing. That wasn't shock. That wasn't personality. That was damage. Castor appeared at Riven's left shoulder. His voice was a low thread of sound, meant only for Riven's ear. Boss. His wrist. Under the cuff. Riven didn't look. He already knew. He'd seen it the moment Kalen caught himself reaching for his cheek. Old scars. Thin. Deliberate. Placed too carefully to be accidents. Riven exhaled through his nose. He turned to Castor without taking his eyes fully off Lysander. Find out who owns him. A pause. Tonight. Lysander laughed. It was the kind of laugh men use when they want everyone in the room to believe they're not afraid. It wasn't working. Own him? Lysander repeated, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. He spread his arms slightly, performing confidence for an audience. He's under our care, Draeger. Legally. You want to make a scene at the Aurelius Gala over a domestic matter. Riven didn't blink. Domestic, he repeated. Just the word. Flat. Like he was reading it off a page and finding it inadequate. The crowd around them had reorganized itself. No one was pretending to look away anymore. Champagne flutes lowered. Conversations dropped to nothing. Even the servers had stopped moving, trays balanced mid-air, because the temperature in the room had changed and every instinct in every body present was saying, pay attention. This matters. Castor stepped slightly left, positioning himself at an angle that blocked the nearest Haraway associate from getting any closer to Riven's back. He didn't announce it. He just moved. That was Castor, the kind of man who handled problems before they became problems. Lysander straightened his jacket again. You should be careful, Draeger. My family has friends. So do I, Riven said. He let that land for exactly 2 seconds. Then he walked forward, not toward Lysander, but toward Kalen. Kalen went rigid. Every muscle in his body locked up at once, like he'd been trained to expect the worst from anyone who approached him directly. His chin dropped. His shoulders came up. His eyes tracked Riven's hands. Riven stopped 2 feet away. He didn't reach out. He didn't move fast. He just stood there, letting Kalen's nervous system catch up to the fact that nothing bad was happening. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up and adjusted the lapel of Kalen's silver jacket. Just barely. Just enough. And in doing so, his eyes dropped to Kalen's cheek. The mark from Lysander's hand was already deepening. A sharp red bloom under the skin, edges spreading. Riven looked at it for 1 full second, then looked back up at Kalen's face. Kalen was watching him like he'd never seen someone be careful before. Like careful was a language he hadn't heard spoken in a long time. Riven stepped back. Lysander had moved closer during those few seconds, emboldened by the fact that Riven hadn't hit anyone. I want him back, he said. Now, before this becomes a legal issue. It's already a legal issue, Riven said, voice still level. You just don't know which kind yet. Lysander's jaw tightened. He reached past Riven. Actually reached past him and grabbed Kalen's forearm. Kalen flinched. Hard. Castor's hand appeared on Lysander's wrist before he could pull. Not squeezing. Just there. An immovable object in a black suit. Lysander looked down at that hand the way people look at something that shouldn't be possible. Stunned, furious, recalculating. Remove your hand from my principal's guest, Castor said. Quiet. Factual. Like he was reading terms from a contract. Guest. Lysander's voice climbed. He belongs to your hand, Castor repeated. Lysander let go. The room exhaled. Riven turned to look at Kalen again. This time he didn't adjust anything. He didn't perform anything for the crowd. He just looked at him, directly eye to eye, and said nothing for a long moment. Kalen looked back. His lips moved. Nothing came out. But his eyes, dark, exhausted, older than they should have been, said something that his voice couldn't. It looked like, "Don't make it worse." Riven's jaw shifted. He turned back to face Lysander. "He's leaving with me. You can't. Watch." The orchestra hadn't restarted. The servers still hadn't moved. 200 people in formal wear watched Riven Drager turn toward the main exit with Kalen Vire at his side and Castor Cole sealing the space behind them. No one stopped them, because no one in that room, not the lawyers near the back, not the Haraway associates near the bar, not the host standing white-faced near the stage, wanted to be the person who got in Riven Drager's way on a night when his eyes looked like that. They made it to the car in 4 minutes. And it was only when the door closed behind them and the city lights began moving past the windows that Riven finally looked down at Kalen's wrist. The cufflink had shifted. The skin beneath it was uneven in a way that skin shouldn't be. Riven said nothing, but something inside him went very, very still. And Castor, riding up front already on his phone, spoke first. "Haraway financials going back 6 years. I'll have them in 2 hours. 4 years, Riven said. Go back 10. Castor paused. That specific? Riven didn't answer, because Kalen had pulled his sleeve down, quietly, quickly, and was now staring out the window like he was memorizing the route, like he was already planning how to retrace it, like he'd been in cars before and known exactly when to run. The napkin appeared in Riven's lap before the car hit the second intersection. He looked down. 2 words, written in small, controlled letters, the handwriting of someone who'd learned to make themselves as small as possible even on paper. Don't. Please. Riven read it. Looked up at Kalen. Kalen was watching him with both hands flat on his knees, very still, the way someone goes still when they've learned that stillness keeps the damage smaller. Riven reached into the seat pocket, pulled out a pen, and wrote back. Don't what? He passed the napkin back. Kalen took it. His eyes moved across the words. Then he wrote again, fast this time, like he was fighting the urge to crumple the paper and say nothing at all. Don't take me. They will kill you. Riven read it once, twice. Then he looked out the window at the city sliding past, streetlights, late-night traffic, a corner store with a sign buzzing half-dead in the dark. And he thought about that sentence. They will kill you. Not, they'll report you. Not, they'll sue you. Not even, they'll come after you. Kill. He wrote. How sure are you? Kalen didn't hesitate. Very. Riven passed the pen back to the front seat without looking. Castor caught it without looking either. They'd been doing this long enough that words between them were mostly unnecessary. The estate came into view 22 minutes later. High gates, stone walls, lights that stayed on all night because Riven had decided years ago that he preferred to see what was coming. The car rolled through the gate and stopped under the covered entrance. Riven got out first. Kalen didn't move. He sat in the back seat with his knees pressed together and his eyes scanning the estate. Walls, cameras, guards at the far end of the courtyard. And his expression wasn't what Riven expected. It wasn't relief. It was calculation. Riven leaned back into the open door. You're safe here, he said. Kalen looked at him. Really looked. The way people look when they've been lied to so many times that they've started studying the face behind the words instead of the words themselves. Then he got out. They put him in the east guest room. Good bed, private bathroom, no lock on the outside of the door. Castor's instruction, which was actually Riven's instruction, passed through Castor, because Riven understood that a person who'd been caged didn't need another cage. They needed the door left open so they could see it was open. Riven spent the next hour in his study going through preliminary Haraway files that Castor had pulled from old public records. Shell companies, charitable foundations that showed donations going in and nothing coming out. A guardianship filing from 8 years ago. Kalen Vire, age listed, ward of the Haraway family effective immediately following voluntary relinquishment by prior guardian. Voluntary. That word sat wrong. Sat very, very wrong. Riven pushed the files aside and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then his phone buzzed. Castor Camera 7. East Garden. Riven was up before the sentence finished loading. He moved through the estate fast and quiet, out the side corridor and into the East Garden, where the hedges were trimmed sharp and the lights were low and the far wall had a gate that the gardeners used on Thursdays. Tonight was not Thursday. Kalen was at the gate. He had his shoes off, holding them in one hand, moving in socked feet across the stone path so quietly that the camera had almost missed him. He was good at quiet, practiced at it. His posture was low, shoulders in, making himself small in the dark. He had one hand on the gate latch when Riven spoke. "Where are you going?" Kalen spun around. His eyes went wide, not scared exactly, more like caught. The expression of someone who'd run before and almost made it and knew exactly what almost making it cost. Riven stood at the garden entrance, hands loose at his sides, not blocking the gate, not moving toward him. He waited. Kalen looked at the gate, looked back at Riven. His jaw moved, his throat moved, and then nothing. Riven walked to the stone bench near the hedgerow and sat down. He pulled out his phone, opened a notes app and held it out. Kalen stared at it. Riven waited. Slowly, one step, then another. Kalen crossed the garden and took the phone. He typed, passed it back. "You don't understand what you brought home." Riven typed, "Then explain it to me." Long pause. Kalen's fingers hovered over the screen. The garden was quiet except for the low sound of the city beyond the walls. Distant traffic, a siren far off, the normal noise of a world that had no idea what was happening inside this courtyard. Kalen typed, passed it back. "I ruin everyone I'm near. It's not a choice. It's just what happens." Riven read that. He looked up at Kalen. Standing there in socked feet with his silver jacket wrinkled and his hair loose from wherever it had been styled hours ago. And something about the way he said it was the worst part. Not dramatic, not performing grief, just factual. Like he'd run the math enough times to stop arguing with the answer. Riven typed back, "You're not a guest here." Kalen read it. His eyes narrowed slightly. Riven took the phone and finished the sentence. "Your protection. Mine." Kalen looked up from the screen. His expression didn't crack, but something behind it shifted. Like a door moving an inch, not opening, just acknowledging that a knock had happened. He didn't go back to the gate, but he didn't go back inside either. He just stood there in the garden, holding Riven's phone, looking at those two words, "Mine." And in the east corridor, just inside the door where the camera angle didn't reach, Castor stood with his arms crossed and his face doing the thing it did when he already knew how something was going to end. The file hit Riven's desk at 2:47 in the morning. Castor didn't knock. He didn't need to. He placed the folder flat on the surface, stepped back, and crossed his arms. "Haraway Group is broke," he said. "Has been for 3 years." Riven didn't look up from the document he was already reading. How broke? The kind where the family name is the only thing still running on credit. Riven turned a page. The charitable foundation? Ghost accounts. Money goes in. Splits into 12 sub-accounts. Disappears into 3 shell companies registered offshore. Castor paused. Same shell structure appears twice in federal watchlist filings. Never investigated. Both times, the case was reassigned and closed within 60 days. That made Riven look up. Reassigned to who? Castor reached over and opened the file to a page near the middle. One name. Highlighted. Senator Halden Greaves. Riven sat back in his chair. He knew that name. Everyone in his world knew that name. Greaves had been in public office for 11 years. Built his career on anti-corruption platforms, community safety initiatives, keynote speeches about protecting the vulnerable. His face had been on 3 magazine covers in the last 2 years alone. And now his name was attached to a shell company that swallowed money connected to the Haraway family. Riven closed the file. Where's Kalen? Guest room. Hasn't slept. Castor's expression didn't change. The motion sensors show he's been sitting at the window since we came in. Riven stood up. He found Kalen exactly where Castor said. Perched on the window seat of the east guest room, knees pulled up, watching the courtyard below. He didn't startle when the door opened. He just turned his head slowly, like a person who'd learned to sense the approach of footsteps before they arrived. Riven sat in the chair near the desk, not close, not looming, and set the tablet between them with the Notes app open. Talk to me, he typed. Kalen looked at the screen, then at Riven. Then he reached over and typed 3 words. They don't hurt. Riven frowned. What doesn't? Kalen took the tablet back. Typed longer this time. He wrote slowly, like pulling each sentence out of somewhere it had been buried. The Haraways. They don't just hurt me. There were others. In the program. The shelter program they funded. The one that was supposed to help people. Riven kept his expression flat. Kept his breathing even. Inside, something had shifted very cold. What kind of shelter? He typed. Kalen hesitated. His fingers touched the screen. Stopped. Started again. He typed 1 word. Trafficking. The room went quiet in a way that had weight to it. Riven stared at the word for a moment. Then he looked up at Kalen, who had set the tablet down and pulled his knees back to his chest and was watching Riven the way someone watches a fuse after the match has been struck. Waiting to see if it burns or goes out. Riven's jaw tightened. Locked. Released. He picked the tablet up and typed. How long did you know? Kalen. Long enough. Riven. Did you try to report it? Long pause. Kalen reached for the tablet. He typed 2 words. I tried. He passed it back. And then, very slowly, he pulled his collar to the left. Just slightly, just enough, and tilted his head. On the left side of his neck, below the jawline, was a scar. Not clean. Not surgical. The kind of scar that happens when something is done quickly and deliberately and with no intention of healing. Riven looked at it for 1 full second. Then he set the tablet on the desk and stood up, turned away from Kalen, and stood at the window for 20 seconds without moving. 20 seconds of absolute stillness. When he turned back around, his face was composed, controlled, but his eyes had changed. He typed, You're gonna tell me everything. Not tonight, when you're ready, but everything. Kalen looked at the words for a long time. Then he nodded. Just once. Small. Riven stood. At the door, he stopped. He typed 1 more line and left the tablet on the edge of the desk where Kalen could reach it. No one touches you in this house. That's not a promise. That's a rule. He walked out. In the hallway, Castor was leaning against the wall. Well? Castor asked. Get me everything we have on Greaves, Riven said. Financial, personal, political. Every connection he has to every shipping route that's moved through my network in the last decade. Castor didn't move immediately. You think our routes are tied to this? I think someone made sure they were. Riven said. He walked toward his study without looking back. And behind him, Castor stared at the closed guest room door for a moment. At the thin bar of light visible underneath it, the only sign that someone inside was still awake, still watching, still waiting for something to fall apart the way everything always had before. The nightmares came at 3 a.m. Riven heard it from the hallway. Not a scream, because Kalen couldn't scream, but something worse. A sharp knock of movement. A crash. Silence that landed too hard after too much noise. He was at the door in 12 seconds. He didn't burst in. He turned the handle slow, pushed the door open, and stood in the frame. Kalen was on the floor. Not hurt. Not fallen. He'd gotten there on purpose, pressed into the corner between the nightstand and the wall, arms wrapped around his own knees, head down. His whole body was vibrating. The lamp on the nightstand had been knocked over. That was the crash. Its shade sat crooked on the floor, still casting light sideways across the room. Riven stepped inside. He didn't call out, didn't rush over. He crossed to the center of the room, lowered himself onto the floor, slowly so Kalen could track every movement, and just sat there, cross-legged, for feet away, not touching, not talking. He waited. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Kalen's head came up slightly. His eyes found Riven in the half-dark, checking, rechecking, the look of someone who'd been trained to expect kindness to be the opening move in something cruel. Riven didn't do anything. He just stayed. Another minute went by. The shaking in Kalen's shoulders started to slow. His breathing, which had been fast, panicked, caught in some loop that his body couldn't exit, began to find a different rhythm. Not calm yet, but not falling apart either. Riven reached over slowly to the tablet on the nightstand and set it on the floor between them. He didn't type anything. He just left it there. Available. Kalen's choice. It took another 3 minutes. Then Kalen reached out and pulled the tablet toward him. He typed. Passed it over. I always end up on the floor. Riven read it. He didn't flinch. He typed back. Then we'll stay on the floor tonight. Kalen looked at that sentence for a long time. Something in his face did something complicated, not breaking, not relief exactly, but some version of both that didn't have a clean name. He passed the tablet back. You don't have to do this. Riven, I know. Kalen. Then why? Riven held the tablet for a moment. He thought about the clinical answer, because you're a witness, because you're evidence, because you're useful. All true. All things he could have typed. He typed. Because you looked at me at the gala and didn't ask for anything. Kalen read it. His jaw moved. His throat moved. His lips pressed together. He handed the tablet back. Everyone wants something. Riven, I know that too. They sat in silence for a while after that. The lamp on its side cast the room in long soft shadows. Outside, the estate was quiet. Guards making rounds, cameras rotating, the slow machinery of a protected place doing its work. At some point, Kalen's back found the side of the bed. He was still on the floor, still not in the bed. But he'd moved from the corner. Riven didn't comment on it. At some point after that, Kalen's head tilted, and without making a decision about it, the way bodies sometimes do when they've been awake too long and fear has finally cost more energy than it has to spend. His temple came to rest against Riven's shoulder. Riven went completely still. He didn't move into it. He didn't move away. He stayed. The tablet sat on the floor between them with the screen still lit. And in the morning, when Castor came to check in and found Riven in the guest room, both of them on the floor, Kalen finally deeply asleep, Castor stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he pulled the door almost closed. And in the hallway, quietly, he said to no one, "Boss, you already lost this one." Riven heard him. He didn't argue, because Castor was right about most things. And he was right about this. The problem was what came next. Because by mid-morning, Castor had a new file on the desk. 3 intercepted messages. A burned safe house in the south end of the city. 2 of Riven's shipment routes suddenly exposed in ways that no one outside the inner circle should have known. Someone had moved fast. And the only new thing in Riven's house was Kalen Vire. Castor stood across the desk, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I'm not saying it's him," Castor said. "You're not saying it," Riven answered. Silence. Riven stared at the file. Castor said, "Boss, you started caring." "I know," Riven said. "That's the problem." The shot came from a white sedan. No plates. Tinted windows. It rolled past the east garden wall at exactly 11:14 in the morning while Kalen was walking the perimeter. 20 feet of open air between the hedgerow and the far gate. The only outdoor space Riven had cleared him to use. 20 feet. That's all it took. The window dropped. A lens appeared. Not a gun, a camera. Long barrel, professional grade, angled directly at Kalen's face. Castor was moving before the shutter clicked. He came in from the left, body between the wall and Kalen in under 4 seconds, one hand pressing Kalen low and fast toward the garden entrance while his other hand was already on his radio. The sedan accelerated. Gone in 8 seconds. Castor got them both inside, pulled the door shut, and stood with his back against it for exactly 3 breaths. Then he looked at Kalen. Kalen was pressed against the interior wall, chest heaving. His eyes were wide, but his hands were already moving, already reaching for the tablet on the hallway table like documenting the moment was more important than surviving it. Castor noticed that. He filed it away. Riven was in the security room in 90 seconds flat, pulling up the camera feeds from the exterior walls. The sedan appeared on 3 angles. He froze each frame, zoomed in on the plates, or where the plates should have been. Someone had removed them professionally, not taped over. Removed. The bracket was still there, bolts still in. The plates were just gone. That took tools. That took preparation. That meant this wasn't a Haraway move. The Haraways were arrogant. They used lawyers and leverage and public pressure. They didn't send modified vehicles to photograph a witness outside a private estate. This was something more organized. Riven pulled up the recovered phone from the previous night. The attacker Castor had neutralized near the garden perimeter 24 hours earlier. A man found cutting the exterior camera wire on the north wall, now in holding 2 floors below. The phone had been cracked open by Riven's tech contact. 2 messages recovered. The first, confirm location. The second, bring him alive. Not eliminate. Not neutralize. Alive. Riven read that word 3 times. Then he turned to Castor, who had just walked in behind him. "They don't want him dead," Riven said. "No," Castor agreed. "They want him back." "Yes." Riven turned back to the screen. The frozen frame of the white sedan. The camera barrel pointing through the window like an accusation. "Why alive?" he said, mostly to himself. Castor answered anyway. "Because dead, he can't be controlled. Dead, his testimony goes public automatically. There are people whose careers end the moment that happens." Riven nodded slowly. Then his phone buzzed. A news alert. National level. Senator Halden Greaves had just held a press conference. Riven watched 30 seconds of it on the security monitor, sound low. Greaves stood behind a podium in a gray suit, American flag behind him, expression arranged into practiced concern. He was condemning Mafia interference in civilian protection cases. He was calling for federal investigation. He was naming no one directly, but the description he used. A shipping route operator with known criminal ties who had allegedly abducted a civilian from a private social event. That description left nothing to the imagination. The room Riven was standing in went very quiet. Castor said. He moved fast. He was ready, Riven said. This press conference was written before last night happened. He just needed the trigger. That matters. Greaves had been waiting for an excuse, which meant Greaves had known the gala was coming. Which meant Greaves had someone at the gala feeding him information in real time. Riven looked at the door, at the hallway beyond it, at the direction of the east guest room. He didn't move toward it, but the thought landed anyway, and it sat there cold and uncomfortable, the way truth does when you don't want to look at it directly. Castor was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Boss, you brought a liability into our house." Riven said nothing. Castor pressed. "I'm not saying he's working with them. I'm saying the timing is worth asking about." "I heard you," Riven said. He walked out of the security room, down the hallway, into the east wing. He stopped outside the guest room door and stood there for 4 full seconds before he knocked. No answer. He opened the door. The room was empty. The window was open, and on the bed, neatly folded, like something left behind by someone who understood that neat was the least they could offer, was the silver jacket from the gala. He was in the stairwell, 3rd floor, the one that dead-ended at the supply corridor. Castor found him there 6 minutes after Riven left the guest room, sitting on the top step with his back against the wall and his knees up and the tablet pressed flat against his chest like a shield. He hadn't made it outside. He'd gotten as far as the stairwell and stopped. Riven came up the stairs alone. Castor stepped back without being asked. Riven sat on the step below Kalen, 1 level down, not blocking him in, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. Kalen looked at the hand, looked at Riven's face, handed him the tablet. Riven opened it. The last thing Kalen had typed, before he'd stopped in the stairwell, before he'd gotten wherever he thought he was going, was still on the screen. "I ruin everyone I'm near." Riven read it. He remembered reading those exact words before, in the garden 2 nights ago. Same sentence, same handwriting, same flat, exhausted certainty behind it. He typed, "You already tried that line." A pause. Then he typed, "This time tell me the real reason you were leaving." He passed it back. Kalen held the tablet for a long time. His jaw worked. His eyes went somewhere distant. Not unfocused, but internal, like he was making a decision about how much of a door to open and deciding if the other person could be trusted with the key. He typed. He passed it back. "I heard Castor. In the hallway outside the security room. He thinks I'm the leak." Riven read it. "And?" He typed. "And he's not wrong to think it." Riven's hands stilled on the tablet. He typed, "Explain." Kalen took it back. This time he wrote longer. More than he'd typed in 1 sitting since he arrived. Riven could see the hesitation in the words. Sentences that started one direction and redirected. The handwriting of someone pulling a story out of a place where it had been buried deep and kept hidden specifically because telling it had cost something terrible the last time. He finished. Passed it over. Riven read. He read it twice. The story went like this. 8 years ago, Kalen had been part of a legal Omega advocacy organization. A shelter network operating across 4 cities, funded by private donors, connected to a legitimate nonprofit. The Haraways were listed as founding sponsors. The shelter was real, for a while. Then the shipping containers started coming. Kalen had been assigned to document incoming aid packages, supplies, food, medication, transferred through the same ports the Haraway family used. That was his job. Inventory, numbers, dates, container codes. One night, 3 containers arrived that weren't on any manifest. He checked the codes, cross-referenced them. What he found, scrawled in the margins of a printed manifest, in handwriting that wasn't his, were names. Not cargo descriptions. Names. and one container code that appeared in federal shipping records under a different registrant entirely. A name he recognized. Greaves. Kalen had written it down, taken photos, planned to go to a federal contact he trusted. He never got the chance. They came for him that same night. He woke up in a room he didn't recognize, and when he tried to call out, nothing came. Not because he was gagged, because what they'd done, quickly, efficiently, in the hours he couldn't account for, had taken the sound from him entirely. He didn't remember how. He remembered waking up silent, and being told he would stay that way. Riven put the tablet down on the step beside him. He looked at the wall. His jaw was tight. The muscle along it moved twice. Then stopped. He typed, "You recognized me at the gala." He passed it over. Kalen read it. His eyes didn't widen. They did the opposite, went narrow, careful, bracing. He typed, "Yes, Riven." "From where?" Kalen held the tablet. A long pause. The stairwell was quiet except for distant estate sounds. Someone on a radio 2 floors down. The hum of a security system cycling through its rotation. Kalen typed, passed it back. "From the port. The night the containers came. You were there." Riven stared at that line. He typed, "I run legitimate shipping." Kalen, "I know." Riven, "Then why?" Kalen took the tablet before he finished, typed fast, handed it back with both hands like he needed to get the words out before he changed his mind. "Because the people who hurt me used your routes. Without your knowledge. I think they always planned to use you as cover. And I think the reason Greaves wants me back is because I can prove it." Riven set the tablet down again. He sat very still for a moment. Then he said, out loud into the stairwell, voice low, something he hadn't said in a long time. "Then I'll burn the whole thing down." Kalen looked at him. Riven looked back. "If you were bait," he said. He held Kalen's gaze. "Then they're about to learn what happens when the hook doesn't hold." The betrayal came from inside. Not Kalen. A man named Dorian Voss, 12-year employee, logistics coordinator. Had access to 6 shipping manifests, 2 safehouse locations, and the internal communication channel Riven used to move information between his senior staff. Castor found out at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. He didn't tell Riven right away. He spent 40 minutes verifying it first, pulling access logs, cross-referencing timestamps, tracking the exact moment Dorian's credentials were used to open files that Dorian had absolutely no operational reason to open. The pattern was clean. Too clean. Someone had coached him on how to make it look routine. They hadn't coached him well enough. Castor walked into Riven's study at 6:47 and placed a single printed sheet on the desk. Riven picked it up. "Read it. Set it down." "How long?" he said. "At least 4 months, Castor said. "Before Kalen." That landed like a stone in still water. Before Kalen. Meaning the exposed safehouses, the intercepted shipments, the burned routes. None of it was because Kalen had arrived. All of it had already been in motion. Someone had been bleeding Riven's operation from the inside for months before the gala ever happened. Kalen wasn't the variable. Kalen was the distraction. Riven sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for 4 seconds. Then he said, "Where is he now?" "Holding," Castor said. "He doesn't know we know. Keep it that way." Riven stood up. He walked to the window overlooking the east courtyard. Morning light was coming through at a low angle, cutting across the stone in long pale lines. Kalen was visible in the corner of the yard below, sitting on the bench near the hedgerow, tablet in his lap, doing what he did every morning now. Writing. Not communicating. Just writing. Pages of it. Riven had never asked what. He watched him for a moment. Then he turned back to Castor. I need to know every file Dorian touched, every contact he called, every message he sent, encrypted or otherwise. Working on it. And I need to know if Greaves made direct contact with him, or if there was a layer between them. There's always a layer, Castor said. Find it. Castor started for the door. Riven said, Castor. He stopped. Don't tell Kalen yet. A pause. He'll blame himself, Riven said. Castor looked at him for a moment. Something in his expression was almost careful. I know, he said, and then he left. Riven stayed at the window. He thought about the timeline. For months of internal bleeding. Months of carefully leaked information. Just enough to hurt, not enough to collapse. Like someone wanted his organization weakened. Not destroyed. Weakened. Available to pressure. Because a weakened Riven Draeger was a controllable one. Greaves. The senator needed leverage. Real leverage. The kind that didn't come from legal proceedings or public campaigns. He needed Riven compromised enough to be pushed, to hand over Kalen, to go quiet, to disappear from this story. That had been the plan. And it had almost worked. Except Riven had gone to the gala that night. Except Riven had looked across a ballroom and seen a man in a silver suit press his hand flat against a marble floor, and something in him had refused to look away. He was still at the window when his phone buzzed. Castor, check the news. Riven pulled up the alert. Senator Halden Greaves, live press conference, third in 1 week, was announcing a federal anti-trafficking initiative. New funding. New oversight structure, his name on the program, his face at the podium, and in the lower third of the broadcast, a scrolling headline, Domestic Terrorism Designation under Review for Known Organized Crime Figure. No name, but the description left nothing out. Riven set the phone down. He looked out at Kalen below. Still on the bench, still writing, still completely unaware that the man who'd originally put him in danger had just moved to the next phase. And then something happened that Riven didn't expect. Kalen looked up, directly at the window, like he'd sensed it. Their eyes met through the glass. Second floor to courtyard, 15 feet of distance. And Kalen's expression did something complicated. Something that wasn't fear and wasn't hope and was instead the specific look of someone who has decided they are done running. Then he held up the tablet. One typed line, visible from where Riven stood. Whatever you're planning, I want in. Riven stared at that for a long moment. Then, for the first time in a long time, something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. He picked up his phone and called Castor. Change of plans, he said. Get me the Haraway Charity Press event details. The one next Friday. Pause on the line. All of it, Castor asked. Every room layout, every guest list, every camera position. Riven looked back out the window. And get Kalen a clean suit. The Haraway Charity Press event started at noon. By 12:08 it was over. Not because it ended, because Riven walked in. He came through the main entrance of the Caldwell Convention Center with Castor on his left and Kalen on his right. Kalen in a charcoal suit, clean-lined, no cufflinks this time, nothing hiding his wrists. Just open, present, chosen. The event was packed. Journalists, photographers, city officials. A string quartet in the corner playing something soft that nobody was listening to because the moment Riven Draeger appeared in the doorway, the entire room recalibrated. Lysander Haraway saw him first. His face went the color of old chalk. Riven didn't look at him. He moved toward the press area. The cluster of cameras and microphones set up for the Haraway family's planned statements. And he stopped in front of them without waiting to be introduced, without requesting the floor, without asking anyone's permission. He simply stood there, And the room went quiet because rooms do that around him. He spoke. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just clear and calm and precise, the way a man speaks when he's been waiting a long time to say something and has finally decided the cost of silence is higher than the cost of speaking. He laid out the shell companies first. Names, account numbers, dates of formation, cross-referenced against Haraway charitable donation records going back 6 years. He presented it in under 4 minutes, reading from a document that Castor's team had spent 72 hours preparing. He laid out the container codes next. Ports, dates, discrepancies between official manifests and what the cameras showed going in and out. He didn't name Greaves directly, not yet. He named the registration number, the federal filing, the timestamp that placed that registration in the same system as the senator's own transportation authorization logs. He let the journalists do the math. They were fast. By the time Riven stopped speaking, 3 reporters had their phones out and were already running the cross-references live on their screens. One of them said, not to anyone in particular, just out loud, the way people say things when they're stunned. This is federal. Lysander moved. He crossed the room in 8 steps, voice climbing. This man abducted a ward of our family. He has no voice, Riven said, turning to face him. Quiet, flat. Kalen Vire has no voice. You made sure of that, didn't you? Not a question. Lysander stopped. The cameras were all pointed at them now. He was under our legal. Show me the contract, Riven said. Silence. Show me the original guardianship filing. The one that lists his prior guardian. Show me the voluntary relinquishment papers because I've read them, and the signature on the consent line is dated 3 weeks after the person signing it was hospitalized and unable to write. The room was absolutely still. Lysander's father, Evander Haraway, 70 years old, standing near the back with 2 lawyers beside him, had gone gray in the face. Lysander turned to Kalen. His expression changed. The composure cracked. What came through underneath wasn't anger. It was panic. You can't speak, Lysander said, voice dropping, directed at Kalen like a threat, like a reminder, like he still believed that silence was the cage it had always been. You cannot say a word in this room. Kalen looked at him. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the tablet. He connected it to the convention center's public display system. Castor had arranged that too, 40 minutes before the event started, and he typed 3 words on a screen that now stretched 12 feet wide behind the Haraway family podium. I am not property. The room erupted. Not in anger. Not in applause. In the specific noise that happens when a crowd of people suddenly understands that what they are watching is real, and that it matters, and that they are going to have to decide what to do with the fact that they were in the room when it happened. Cameras went up everywhere. Evander Haraway sat down. Not by choice. His legs just stopped working. 2 financial investigators, who had been positioned near the side entrance since 11:45, coordinated by Castor's contact at the Oversight Bureau, began moving through the crowd toward the Haraway family representatives. Lysander spun toward Kalen. He moved fast. Too fast, the move of a man who has run out of rational options and defaulted to the only power he thought he had left. Castor stepped in front of Kalen before Lysander's hand was even halfway extended. One hand on Lysander's collar. 1 foot planted. Still, Lysander dangled there for a moment. Actually dangled, toes barely touching the floor, and looked at Castor the way people look at things they truly did not see coming. Your family is being arrested, Castor said quietly. I'd stop moving. Across the room, raised voices. A lawyer on his phone talking fast. 2 more investigators at the main entrance. A journalist with a recorder pressed toward Evander Haraway, who was staring at the 12-foot display screen, at those 3 words, like he couldn't look away from them. Riven stood beside Kalen. He didn't touch him. He didn't need to. Kalen was shaking. Not from fear this time. The shaking was different. The specific vibration of someone who has held something enormous inside their body for years and just put it down and is not sure yet how to exist without the weight of it. Lysander screamed from across the room. Castor had released him, stepped back, let the investigators take over. You don't know who you're protecting. His voice bounced off the convention center walls. Riven turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge the sound. He didn't respond, because 3 seconds later, the red dot appeared on the back of the chair 18 inches to Riven's left. Riven saw it in his peripheral. He had exactly enough time to identify what it was. And then Castor was already moving. The shot hit the display screen. Glass and light exploded outward, a diagonal crack splitting through the 12-foot image right across the words, "I am not property." And the room detonated into screaming, bodies dropping, chairs overturning, the string quartet scattering like birds from a wire. Castor had Riven on the ground in the same second. One hand on his shoulder, body angled as a block, head down. Riven was already moving, not away, but toward Kalen, who hadn't dropped because Kalen didn't know how to read a laser sight and had stood there for 2 full seconds after the shot, trying to understand why the screen was broken. Riven grabbed him by the arm and pulled him low and fast toward the side corridor. The same exit Castor had marked on the floor plan 48 hours earlier. Second door on the left past the catering entrance. Leads to the loading bay. Loading bay has a vehicle. It always has a vehicle. They moved through chaos. People running. Security personnel with radios. Someone on the ground not because they were hurt but because they were sensible. The sound of the convention center's fire system engaging. A flat alarm cutting through everything. Lights going amber. The loading bay door hit the morning air. The car was there. They were inside in under 90 seconds. The city moved past the windows. Nobody spoke for 3 full minutes. Then Kalen picked up the tablet from the seat beside him. He typed. He passed it to Riven. That shot wasn't meant to miss. Riven read it. Looked up. Looked back down. It missed, he typed back. Kalen. This time. Riven set the tablet on the seat between them and looked out the window. Buildings passing. Sky flat and gray above the city line. The sound of the alarm was gone now, just traffic, just movement, just the ordinary noise of a world still going about its business while everything inside this car had changed shape. They reached the estate. Castor checked the perimeter twice before letting the car through the gate. Riven got out. Kalen got out. They stood in the courtyard for a moment, not talking, not moving, both of them just standing in the morning light with the adrenaline still working its way out of their systems. And somewhere across the city, the Haraway accounts were being frozen, Evander Haraway was being walked to a federal vehicle, and a news cycle was catching fire in real time. Kalen touched his own throat, just his fingertips, lightly. The gesture lasted about 2 seconds. But Riven saw it. And it wrecked him more than the laser sight had. He said, out loud, no tablet, just his voice in the open air of the courtyard. I'm going to find someone who can help, with your voice. Surgeons, specialists, whatever it takes. Kalen looked at him. Riven said, I'm not promising a miracle. I'm promising I'll try. Kalen's jaw moved. His eyes went somewhere private for a moment. Then he reached for the tablet. He typed slowly, if you keep me here, you'll make enemies forever. Riven read it. He looked at Kalen. Standing in his courtyard, charcoal suit wrinkled from the chaos, hair undone, tablet in both hands, asking a question he already knew the answer to because people who've been used their whole lives get very good at spotting when the math doesn't work in their favor. Riven typed back, Then they'll spend forever learning what it costs to come for what's mine. Kalen read that. He didn't type anything back. He just looked at the words for a long time. And then, quietly, slowly, like something long locked down was finding a new position, he nodded. Just once. Riven turned toward the estate doors. At the entrance, Castor was waiting. He was holding a sealed file. His expression was the specific expression of a man who has bad news and has already decided the only way through it is direct. "Talk," Riven said. Castor held out the file. "Greaves just signed a federal declaration," he said. "Domestic terrorism designation. Official. Your name is in it." Riven took the file. He didn't open it. He looked at Kalen standing in the courtyard behind him, at the morning light on the stone, at the man who had been silenced and hidden and used as collateral and who had still, somehow, stood in front of a 12-foot screen and told the world what he was not. Riven turned back to the estate. "Get me every contact I have in federal oversight," he said, "and call Dorian Voss up from holding. It's time he had a conversation about what kind of deal he wants." Castor fell in step beside him. "And Greaves?" he asked. Riven didn't stop walking. "The Haraways thought they were the war," he said. He pushed through the estate doors. "Greaves is just the beginning, and that is where we leave them, not in a quiet ending, but on the edge of something larger. The Haraways are finished." Kalen finally spoke. "And Riven Drager is no longer playing defense. But Senator Greaves is still standing. And the people who buy silence are never out of resources. This story is far from over. If this moved you, if Kalen's courage hit different, if Riven's choice to stay when staying was dangerous reminded you of something real, leave a comment below and tell me what moment got you. Your words matter here, and so do you. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every story we tell is built for people who want more than entertainment, who want to feel something true and carry it with them. Share this with someone who needs to remember that silence is not the end of the story. And come back for part 2, because the war just started.